This meeting to order. Good evening. I am Eric Greenberg, Chair of the FY24 CA Board of Directors. Please remember that the work session is being live streamed. You can find the agendas and background materials for this evening on the CA Board of Directors webpage. Links to these documents can also be found in the description section of our YouTube live stream for those watching the work session there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones unless speaking. If you're in the room, please ensure that all cell phones are silenced. Raise your hand to speak and I'll record the names in the order which I see them. If you are virtual, please use the chat feature. As we move through the work session, I'll introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote is taken, I will restate the motion, as well as who motioned it and seconded. If at any point you have trouble hearing me or any member present, please say so. Tonight's timekeeper is Sky Anderson. I will now call the roll. Sky.
Here.
Reg. Here. Karen.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Ellen. Is Ellen online?
Alan's online.
Ellen, can you hear us?
Alan, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Ellen.
Well, that's what I thought. I keep saying.
He is online.
Ellen, are you
It
unmuted?
looks like the speaker was muted.
It's probably.
I think you're on mute, Ellen. Or something's muted.
Why is it? Is it the TVs that are muted?
Alan says the boardroom is muted.
Yeah, we're muted.
Oh, he can't even hear us.
He can't hear us, and we can't
Yeah,
hear him.
right now I think there's a mute
Now
issue.
I can.
Okay.
All right,
There
we're
he
good.
is.
Thanks,
Thank
Al.
you.
Alan. Alan is here. Dennis?
Here.
Keith? Bill? Here. Andy?
Here.
Dietrich? And I am here. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Is
I move we approve the agenda.
there a second?
Yes.
Are there any objections to the agenda? Seeing no objections, the agenda is so approved. We'll now move to the next item on the agenda, which is a look back at a great year.
So I thought it would be a great idea. There's been so much good work that's been done over the last year. I thought it would be fun to look back at some of those moments. So I had the communications and marketing team put together a compilation of 10 of the very many things that took place over the year in a fun little video. The CA Point celebration, where we had about 600 kids, something with the lakefront, the Trunk or Treat event that Dan and his crew put on at the sports park. And at the end, there is a great video takeoff on Friends with some really enthusiastic CA team members that I can't wait for you to see.
If you got the CA points, you could come here, and they're very fun. I'm proud of myself because I've seen an improvement with my grades and things like that. So, yeah, that's why I'm here.
I love to see all the families together. It's a great opportunity for people to bond and actually the community.
I'm so proud of my kids, and I'm really, really appreciative of Columbia Association for giving us a program like this to enjoy the summer with each other. It's amazing to see like your effort in school turn into something beyond yourself, like where you get to be rewarded for it. It's really a good feeling, honestly.
I'm looking forward for rainbow flags, rainbow jackets, rainbow stickers, and rainbow shirts.
Why are you excited to be here?
Because I love Pride.
And I'll just close by saying, as we move into the new year, let's not forget who we are and the good work that happens every day and the people that work and volunteer that are behind it.
Thank you, Dennis, and we look forward to a great 2024. Next, we will move on to resident speak out. Speakers will be asked to speak in the order in which they signed up. Individuals have 3 minutes for comments. Anyone representing an organization is allotted 5 minutes. Following remarks, the board will have a chance to ask questions. Please mute your microphones when you are not speaking. We ask that speakers adhere to the 3 or 5 minute time limit when presenting their testimony, and for board members to limit questions in order to stay within the allotted time period. The first speaker is John Lankos.
Hello. Happy New Year. I haven't been here in a while, and I thought I would take this opportunity to share some thoughts. First, I'd like to thank Chris Fuchs for his amazing pirate adventures. My family participated in the December event in Hickory Ridge. This type of community-based activity brings families together for an adventure in CA open space. I would also like to thank CA for allowing this terrific activity to take place. I hope CA will continue to encourage such positive uses of its property. As you update the strategic plan, I ask that you consider several items. 1, reevaluate products and services provided by CA to see if 57 years after its formation, CA's offerings match the needs of the ever-changing community. Just because we always did something one way doesn't mean there aren't new or improved ways to carry out CA's mission. There may be things that CA did in the past that may no longer be needed. 2, there's always been a lack of understanding of just what CA is and isn't, what it can and can't do, and what is its responsibility to the community. With no local paper and other means of getting information so segmented, CA should work on new strategies to engage all residents, but particularly new ones. 3, I would also like to specifically request that CA begin now to work with other entities such as Howard County and the Downtown Columbia Partnership for a spectacular 2026 year-long celebration of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. As you're working on the strategic plan update, I ask that this board work with your own paid professional staff who have years of education and work product in their areas of expertise. When I sat in your chair, we understood that listening to our chosen professionals gave us the information we needed to make decisions that would best benefit the lien payers. Finally, this coming year will bring the hiring of a new CA president and CEO. I read the recent job posting and was unimpressed and rather disheartened by it. The very first bullet under essential responsibilities and knowledge is that the president-CEO must have the, quote, ability to work cooperatively with the board of directors, end quote. This requirement is ahead of sound management, leadership, and experience. Surely, the ability to run a $75 million company with 1,300 employees should be a higher priority. I ask that you reorder the priorities, since the board that hires the president may not have the same members as the board that the new president will serve. Thank you for listening and for your service to the community.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you. Next, we have Sharon Boyes. Sharon, are you out there?
I am. Hello.
And she is
Good evening.
representing Protect Our Streams.
Thank you so much. Tonight I was going to talk about easements, the watershed management plan, the budget, and the WAC committee, but instead I'm going to talk about the storm on Tuesday, Longfellow, the impacts of climate change. It's here, it's real, and it has been intensified by our actions and our inactions. The 3-inch rain produced a torrent of water. 3 inches is what is expected as the new normal, and it terrifies me. For what if we get a hurricane? There's new sediment in the stream and in the floodplain, which might sound good, but how is a sediment-filled floodplain different from what you said needed to be fixed. The process has started all over again. And now we have eroding stream banks, banks that are undercut, stream banks that are melting into the stream. There's a new branch in the culvert pipe under Hesperus Drive. There was flooding near homes. I haven't heard of any wet basements, but again, I'm really scared for if we get a hurricane. There was evidence of flooding downstream. There's dying trees on the edges that are still falling into the creek. There was water in people's backyards. And there was creeks flooding down the road and in people's backyards, uprooting trees that had withstood the weather here for a century, for over 100 years. But the ground isn't frozen. It's saturated. And it couldn't take this torrent of water and wind because we're not collecting it. We need a Green Streets program in Longfellow. I've asked for it many times. We're going to have our streets open and we're going to be walking on the water main infrastructure. There's no better time to do it, that we so desperately need it. And I'm begging you to stand up for our community and work with the county on this. I was one of two people who attended a meeting with John McCoy on the new bioretention pond in Longfellow. I haven't walked up to see it yet, but I've heard about it. Apparently, it failed. Again, I haven't seen it yet. It makes me wonder, who designed the pond? What standards were it designed for? Was it designed for the old standards, which are the current standards? Or was it designed for the new standards that MD is working on? We know 3 inches is going to be a normal rainfall in the future. We should be building things with more than that in mind. We need to plant that hillside. We need to take a look at the design of that pond. We need 3 layers of a canopy in there. We need to engage the school. We need to ask them to put rain gardens in and capture the stormwater runoff where it's occurring. We need to get the kids involved. We need an expert, an independent expert, to work with us to develop a watershed management plan. I hope you put that in the budget. We've been asking for this for years. There was an article in the Washington Post I was hoping to bring in, and I will the next time I came. It's from I know it's from January 7th, 2024. And it shows a dam on the Klamath River in California, that brown river, and what the river looked like when they removed the dam, the impoundment. It's now a blue, clean river. When we put dams in place, when we dam our streams, the sediment can't transport. It can't follow its natural process. It's supposed to move downstream. We're collecting it with a dam, which now has to be dredged. That's just the way it goes. We've put these lakes in, and we need to maintain them. So we need an expert to help us with that. So it's time that we stop talking about stuff and we take real action with experts who are forward-thinking. We had a climate study done that showed that we were being protected with our steep stream banks by keeping water in place. And now we're removing them, putting people in jeopardy, and it's already starting to fail. So I thank you for your time and for listening, and I really hope we can work together quickly to resolve some of the things we have going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Thank you for your time. Next, we have Amy Bennett.
I'm here.
Hey, Amy, we can hear you.
Okay, great. First, Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Amy Bennett. I've lived in Columbia since its inception and in Long Beach for the last 30 plus years. I'm here tonight with some reasoned concerns about the recently published WAC charter. I ask that you take into consideration the concerns that I'm going to raise. The first is, I believe that the process for changing the charter was not followed. It's my understanding that in order to change a charter, which I don't believe the board knew was going to happen when it approved the committees going back to the staff. But anyway, my understanding is that the committees have to vote 2/3 in support of any change to the charter. I don't believe that's happened because I or friends of mine have been participating in all of the WAC meetings, both at the local level that we are members of or residents of, and I have never, not in the Columbia Association board meetings or in the WAC meetings, have I heard any discussion of charter changes. So I would ask you to take a look at the process that's been in place for changing the charter and ask that once the committee recommends 2/3, once the 2/3 of the committee recommends support, it's supposed to go to the board of directors for approval. Again, I've listened into the majority of the board meetings over the last year and haven't heard no discussion of charter changes. The second thing I'd like to bring to your attention is that the changes don't address qualifications needed by the committee. We've all learned over the last couple of years that as Columbia has grown, our needs have grown. And we need to make sure that committee members' qualifications are appropriate. The third issue that I think is extremely important is, and I'm seriously asking you to look at this, this change allows the committee to override the will of the village board that represents the residents. In other words, if someone from Longreach is appointed through our board to serve on the committee, then you have the committee has the right to throw the person off. What kind of a society are we living in? Columbia is already seen as a clique. Columbia Association is already seen as a clique. These changes
are closing statement. That's time.
Okay, 1 second. These changes are designed to exclude, not include. I thank you for your serious consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? I have a couple questions. One, what is the speaker referenced changing the charter. So what is the policy or what is the process for changing the charter?
So I would say that it's not on the agenda, and it's not a question for the resident speak out for
The resident.
Amy. Pardon me? So I'm not sure that we're not, the committees were turned over to staff. And if the board wants to take action and vote to turn and give them back to themselves, then they should do that. But once they were turned over to staff, it was staff's responsibility to change the charter. So if the board as a body wants to vote to take the committees back and what that means, and and the reason that they were turned over to staff is they were not functioning properly, and they were fraught with peril.
Alan?
Let's not get
Thank
into
you.
discussion.
Alan raised his hand.
Amy, I wasn't clear on one point you were making. What was it you were saying was the potential consequence if a committee member disagreed with what their village board wanted?
I'll repeat it, Alan. Stated in the charter that was published on Monday for the WAC, it says that a village can recommend that a person be appointed to the WAC, but the WAC has the authority to say no. If you're going to do that, just pick your own members. Don't put us all through this.
I see. Thank you. That clarifies it.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Richard Bannister. Richard, are you out there? Is he on? Okay. Is he muted? He is. He's got to unmute himself. Richard, I think you need to unmute.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I can't see myself, but that's okay. I know what I look like. Anyway, first of all, ditto to Amy. But first, hello and happy New Year to all. My name is Richard Bannister, and I've been a resident, I will have been a resident of Columbia for 40 years this coming fall. Now, I too have several concerns about the Watershed Advisory Committee charter, the new one, but I plan to put most of my concerns into writing for the board at a later date. Tonight, I want to focus on just one. From Article 3, Section 8, and it's a new section, it says, each member agrees to conduct themselves with civility, treat their fellow members and staff with respect, and engage in open discussions that encourage and regard others' positions. Members shall not engage in intimidating, harassing, abusive, discriminatory, derogatory, or demeaning speech or actions toward their fellow members or CA staff. I would like to add the words fellow residents in two different parts to go along with the staff and the members. So it would read, each member agrees to conduct themselves with civility, treat their fellow members, fellow residents, and CA staff with respect, and engage in open discussions that encourage and regard others' positions. Members shall not engage in intimidating, harassing, abusive, discriminatory, derogatory, or demeaning speech or actions towards their fellow members, fellow residents, or CA staff. Now, I would like to see that the residents be put in, because we've had a couple of occasions, at least, where WAC members have not been respectful of us residents. One was where on May 25th of 23, and I spoke to the board about this. Deborah Wesner used misquotes and false, as chair of the committee on a board meeting. She was using misquotes and false testimony to attempt to dismiss my wife's concerns about the Lake Elkhorn project. Now, I think using false testimony doesn't help Columbia at all, and they need to understand that they represent CA. They represent the board when they speak. Also, I heard a WAC meeting where they were calling those opposing somebody called from the WAC called those opposing the Lake Elkhorn project anti-vaxxers. Now, that's insulting both the people who did have the vaccine, but also people who, for whatever reason, didn't want to take a vaccine. You know, it's a derogatory comment, and I would like to see that stop. Other than that, well, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you for your time. This concludes Resident Speak Out for this evening. To limit interruptions during board discussions, all members of the general public will now be returned to the audience. This means you'll no longer be able to show your camera or unmute your audio, but you're more than welcome to stay as an attendee to watch the remainder of the work session. You can also watch it live stream on the CA Livestream YouTube page. Thank you so much for your participation tonight. I'll now take a moment to allow staff to make this transition. Do board members want a 5-minute recess?
Good.
We'll take 5 minutes. We'll reconvene at 7:30.
Can I look at the agenda? I didn't get a copy.
So we will reconvene. It's now 7:30. And our first item on the agenda is the new strategic plan.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Julia Duran. I'm the Special Projects Manager here at CA, and I'm pleased to welcome back Deepa Srinivasan, who's the founder and president of Vision Planning and Consulting. Many of you remember from November when she had a virtual introduction to the board to kick off the strategic plan project. Deepa and her colleagues are driving the development of the strategic plan and have been working since November primarily to gather and analyze information from the community survey. She's here tonight to give the board and our residents an overview of where they stand in the process and discuss the next steps. Without further ado, Deepa.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. Good to be here in person. So talking about the strategic plan update, it's been a couple months since we started, and then we have a couple months to go, so we're sort of like midway through the process. And the purpose of this meeting is to give you an update, as Julia mentioned, of what we've done so far, where we're going, and more importantly, is to get you all excited about the strategic planning process. So with that, if you recall, the purpose of the existing strategic plan, the purpose of this update is to update what is existing, review all of the mission, vision, priorities, and update that, focus the energy and resources, and then provide a foundation for staff and stakeholders to work towards a common goal in responding to a changing environment and the community. So looking out over the next 5 to 10 year period. So our strategic planning process comprises of 6 steps. So the first step is to conduct a gap analysis, which we call a SWOT, identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'm going to talk about what we have done so far in that step. The next is to develop a mission and vision, look at what we've had in the past and say, where do we want to go from here and how we want to change that. And then we identify strategic areas and objectives. So if you look at mission and vision, they're broad, they're overarching, and getting into sort of the weeds on developing topical areas, developing objectives, and then actionable items that can be actually implemented so the strategic plan is realized. So it's not just a lofty goal of like, you know, here's what we want to do, but also giving you some ideas on how it needs to get implemented. So that comprises the 4th step. And the 5th one is developing an implementation matrix, sort of a roadmap, you know, for over the course of the 5 years in terms of what's going to be done, what's high priority, who's going to be doing it, when it might be done, and so on. And then finally talk about plan maintenance. How do we keep this plan fresh? How do we keep it a living document? So looking at an annual update or a review of the plan to change anything or add stuff based on the needs of the community, whether it's a demographic shift, the pandemic, a natural hazard, Lord forbid, just anything that takes place that sort of makes you veer in a slightly different direction than was originally suggested. So those are the 6 steps of the process. So starting with the gap analysis, so we have conducted a number of one-on-one interviews with senior staff, including the president, the CFO, the vice president of community programs and services. These were individual interviews to identify, again, strengths, weaknesses, the direction, what has happened in the past, where we are, how the pandemic has affected where CA was prior to 2020, where we are now, what we want to look forward to. So in addition to the individual interviews, we also have conducted some roundtable interviews with staff, everybody from community programs and services to community operations to engagement, outreach, for wellness, fitness, and the environmental program. So we're getting to talk to people, a cross-section of folks in the organization to get a feel for what they do and what some of their issues are. We also, if you recall, I might have mentioned a public survey. We developed a public survey and launched it on the 5th of December. It was live for a little over a month, and it closed just a couple of days ago. We were very pleased with the number of responses. It was over 1,100, little over 1,100 responses that were received during that period, particularly considering, it was during the holidays. We weren't sure what to expect, but we were pleasantly surprised. So the goal here for the survey was to capture feedback on from the residents and people who use CA facilities, also people who live out in the county but outside Columbia, on the programs, the facilities, and then also their interpretation of the strategic goals that currently exist. So it's been, the survey closed end of day on the 9th. So we've had yesterday to do a very quick sort of catch-all on what the big picture is. So we will get into more details at the next meeting, but this is sort of really high level without getting into any detailed analysis, if you will. So in terms of respondents, the bulk, as you can imagine, were Columbia residents. 66% were in Columbia. We had folks that work in Columbia but don't live there, and then we also have folks who work in Howard County and who are residents of the county and not Columbia. The age of the respondents, over 45, we had about 70% of those who completed the survey were over 45. So between 45 and 54 years, it was 18%. 55 to 64, it was almost 20%. And then over 65, it was 30%. We were able to get about 20% of, the younger population, but it is challenging. They don't want to spend time to complete a survey. I say that being a mom of two younger kids. So, but overall, I think we caught all of the age groups that were predominantly using CA facilities.
Actually,
in terms,
okay, go back. I'm not sure if you want to take questions in the middle of the slides or at the end.
Sure.
But I had two questions on the slide. If someone was a resident of Columbia and they worked in Columbia, do they show up as just a resident of Columbia, or how's that recorded? If they're in two categories.
If they lived in Columbia?
If they live in Columbia and work in Columbia, how is that recorded?
They would check both boxes.
Yeah.
So they would, it would feature.
It show up twice?
Yes.
And the other question is, did the survey make a distinction between Columbia as in living in Columbia Association versus a Columbia zip code?
The question just said Columbia.
Okay, thanks.
But we do have information, I think, on the zip codes. I'll have to go back and check. So we could make a determination if we did get their address. We could make a determination if it was a Columbia zip code versus CA. I'll get back to you on that.
Alan?
Well, my question is similar to yours, Eric, but I hear the answer, but when I add up those percentages, they add up to approximately 100%. They ought to add up to more than 100% if I, as a resident of Columbia who also works in Columbia, who also works in Howard County, who also is a resident of Howard County, I should have shown up in all those boxes, and so should have a lot of people. I'm not clear how the percentages were only adding up to 100 if people could check more than one box.
If you were a resident of Columbia, you would check Columbia. The resident of Howard County, the way the question was worded is that you lived outside of Columbia but in Howard County. So if you lived, let's say I live in Maple Lawn, I would not check the Columbia box. I would check live in Howard County. So that would not be counted twice.
But people who work in Howard County and work in Columbia and live in Columbia should have been counted twice, and they don't seem to be. I'm just curious about this. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but
We'll go back and check the numbers on that and how they have this thing. I'll make a note to get back to you on that.
appreciate it.
Sure thing.
One final question on this. If someone lived in an out parcel with a Columbia address, would they show up as a resident of Columbia or a resident of Howard County?
If they lived where?
If they lived in an out parcel with a Columbia zip code address, would they show up as a resident of Columbia or a resident of Howard County?
That's a good question. I guess they would make the determination when they check the box.
Okay.
it's, where they feel they fit best, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so getting into the race aspect, about 78% were white or Caucasian, 7% Asian or Asian American, and then there were, it was about 6% that identified as 2 or more races. So the bulk of the respondents were Caucasian. In terms of gender, about 2/3 were female and 1/3 was male of those who responded. In terms of where they lived, in the village that they came from, or whether they were somewhere else in Howard County or outside of Howard County, the breakdown is fairly even. We had Hickory Ridge, King's Contrivance, and elsewhere in Howard County to be over 13%, and then everybody else was just in the 7 to 9% range. But all of the villages were represented. There were very few people who were outside of Howard County that actually completed the survey.
It would be interesting to double check those numbers against the actual population of the different villages.
Yeah.
To see, I mean, for example, Dorsey Search, unless it's got way lower population than the rest of the other villages, looks like it's pretty well underrepresented.
I mean,
It would, so these are percentages of respondents, not compared to their village population.
Dietrich?
And similarly for the previous slide, so it looks like at least African Americans are clearly underrepresented from what I understand of Black representation in Columbia. I guess whites would be overrepresented. I'm not as quite clear about Asian American. And I guess, is there a space where you later break out for Latinos, or you do not do that?
I think they fall under another race.
Okay. In most demographic spaces, Latinos aren't considered a racial category. So that's why I wasn't sure. Another race oftentimes doesn't include Latino. You have to put ethnicity or something like that. But is there any concern, or was there any question about why you weren't able to get something more representative of the African American population in the survey?
I think there was an extensive marketing campaign that was put together and occurred over the past month. And I guess, it was just how people responded. There was not a targeted campaign, if you will, because that was not part of the scope. But CA did a push. It was on social media. There were QR codes. There were hard copies. They did distribute it as well as they could, and this was what was received. We were tracking the it over every week, and we can go back and see if certain weeks there were more or less. Like initially, going back to the age, there were far fewer respondents in the under 18 category. There was almost no one, and then the numbers slowly rose. So, but we have been tracking it on a weekly basis.
Just one other question. I wonder, does CA know racial demographics of its members? I'm wondering if this is more reflective of the members of CA than it is of Columbia residents, or maybe just the survey didn't hit the African population. We just wonder.
I think it would be. I think that's a really good point. It would be good for us if we get the data on the demographics of Columbia as well as the demographics of the CA membership. Mm-hmm. We can compare it to what we have and see where the underrepresentation is.
Alan?
Yeah, I think those are good points, and I would just add to Dietrich your comment that I would hope, given the overrepresentation of white people, the overrepresentation of women, and the underrepresentation of particularly African Americans, and the not knowing what the Hispanic population thinks, I'm hoping that you all be taking those deficits into account as you formulate your thoughts coming from the survey.
It's not just white people, it's older white people, right? And we're looking at a fairly narrow slice here as far as respondents, data is data. We do have something to go with, but we have to make sure that we level that against what we have for individual demographic things here, like age, like race, like gender, and also leveling against the villages. I mean, Longreach with 11% being 33% of the total population, that's a big hole right there. And I don't know what the demographic data of Longreach is, but wow, that's just one number that I see, because that's an easy one to get your head around.
It's pretty mixed, but.
Reg?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Excuse me, I know you said that Hispanic was being counted in another race. What else is counted in the another race?
I'm going to have to go back to, I don't have the data in front of me, but
Sure.
I can surely get back to you on that.
Sure.
Thanks. I think we can continue.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. All right, so in terms of timeline of responses, we started off and then it tapered down middle of December and then it picked up again. This is just kind of giving you an idea. It really doesn't affect any of the analysis per se, but there was a big push right after the new year, and we had one particular day, we had over 101 responses. So it sort of, I think the average, because I got like a daily tab, it was about 28 was the average number of responses per day.
Karen?
Yeah, what happened on January 4th? Was that New Year's resolutions? Was that the gym?
People at the gym.
Probably. I think there was a push, I want to say, right after the new year. So, people who just look at their web pages and.
Okay.
Is there any concern that those 104 or 101, whatever, were the result of, if you will, not quite ballot box stuffing, but, we will sometimes get a number of residents who write to us, and it's obviously the same letter that has been passed around that they've been encouraged to send to us. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but 101 is a fairly large number and could end up skewing the results if they're the result of a push like that.
Well, it could also, and that's a question for our for the marketing folks, I guess. It just sort of depends. Maybe it's like, the survey is about to close. This would be the time for you to respond. This is your chance, and so on and so forth. The messaging might have changed a little bit to get people to respond. All right. So in terms of facility use, 38% that completed the survey said they use the facilities, CA facilities 2 or more times a week. 11% was never used the facilities. 10% was once a week. 7% was once a month. So as you can tell, about almost 50% use the facilities at least once a week. 48%.
Were facilities defined as buildings, or would pathways be included as a facility?
I have to get back to you on that question as well. I believe the facilities were like the pools and the gyms. I'm not too sure the pathways were counted as a facility.
Are they just, do the facilities, I guess another way to ask the question, do the facilities just include paid for facilities, or do they also include things like tot lots that are free to use?
Okay, I will get back to you on that. All right. So there was a question on what people value about Columbia. And this is Columbia as a whole, not just CA. So the numbers there indicate the number of respondents that checked. This was a multiple choice question, and it was not in any particular order. It was not ranked. You could just check as many as you wanted. So the top items that came out of that question was what they valued about Columbia as a whole was clean appearance, cultural diversity, natural beauty, walkability, safety, and public facilities. Those were the top, and the first four had over 550 out of 1,000, out of 1,100 respondents. So clean appearance, cultural diversity, natural beauty, and walkability were sort of the top choices. There was also an open-ended opportunity for an open-ended question on what else that's not here that you can think of in terms of providing value about Columbia as a whole. That included the proximity to DC and Baltimore, easy access to open spaces, pathways for biking and walking, diverse village centers, child-friendly community programs and child-friendly community and programs, and then art and cultural event opportunities. So some of these are kind of reflected in the ones above, but these were just, what we got. Residents actually wrote in that question. Again, very few, maybe about 100 out of the 1,000 might have completed that open-ended question. Some people just don't write. They just like to check boxes. So, but we thought it was interesting to kind of give you a picture of what that entailed. In terms of activities, CA-sponsored activities, about 12% were very satisfied, a little over 40% were satisfied, and 40% were about neutral. So what that says is the bulk of people are sort of satisfied, or they're okay. There are very few people that were dissatisfied, in other words. Also, in terms of public awareness of CA's presence in the community, and this sort of leads to that identity question on who we are and what does CA do. So 44% were somewhat aware, 10% were very aware, and almost 30% were aware. So most people that completed the questionnaire were aware of CA's presence in the community.
Alan?
Thank you. I agree that it's on the left side, there are very few dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, but it looks like a large number of neutral to me. I'm curious how this compares to other organizations that you've asked a similar question about. I don't need exact numbers, but it feels very heavily weighted in the middle to me.
Yeah, it is a lot more than usual. Usually it kind of skews one way or another. So that number kind of stood out to me more than the folks that were satisfied. It's a little unusual. And again, it's people filling out a question that you're like neither here nor there, and that depends on how you feel on a particular day or what have you. And if you've had good and bad experiences, I guess you are going to sort of hit neutral is my sort of inference to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we asked some questions on CA's mission and vision. They were listed on the survey, and in terms of what people feel that CA is accomplishing. So more than 85% felt that CA is accomplishing its mission and its vision, that is, as it currently stands. The mission, which is engage our diverse community, cultivate a unique sense of place, and enhance quality of life. And the vision, where CA creates and supports solutions to meet the evolving needs of a dynamic and inclusive community.
Question on that. So well and very well obviously contributes to the 85%, but does fair also contribute to that 85%?
It would have to.
Yes.
I mean, 'cause fair just seems like it's not quite there.
More than 85%, well, let's just see, so 36.
While we're looking at just,
40, 81.
we seem to be developing a trend where we've got, about 20% to the not so great responses, too big in the middle, neutral and, fair kind of responses, and 10% is very. It seems like we're getting some consistency.
Yes.
That's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, this was an open-ended question about areas that that needed more focus, I guess. And this is all over the page, if you will. There were no categories. You could pretty much just, I guess your personal experience. So there was providing adequate staffing, improving walkability and repairing existing sidewalks, programs for seniors, reducing CA membership fees, providing outdoor restrooms at all lake facilities, greater focus on environmental issues such as recycling, open space, etc., and engaging new residents to Columbia. So overall, the residents seemed pleased with the programs and services that CA offers. That was sort of a catch-all that we came out with.
I'm sorry, were these open-ended question responses as well?
Yes.
Okay.
This one was, yeah. And again, just keep in mind, it closed end of day, today's what? Today's Thursday, end of day Tuesday. So we just had yesterday to do a high level. So we're going to get into the weeds, and I'm going to get back to you with some of these questions that you've asked when we meet next. All right, so that was sort of the, a summary of that first step of, strengths, weaknesses, and so on and so forth. We then, the second step is the vision and mission. And earlier this week, we met with the SLT to go over the mission and the vision. So we sort of defined, how to develop these statements. What is the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement? So to sort of just a quick 101 in the way we develop a vision statement is looking at core values and your unique purpose, your unique value proposition. And it sort of answers the question of the what, the who, the why, and what are we passionate about. It's that overarching statement. The vision sort of takes off from the mission. It's more of a strategic goal. It's aspirational. It's how do we envision our future now and later and how to get there. So it takes from the what and the why you're doing it to how you're going to be doing it. So both mission and vision are aspirational. From the mission, we get to the vision, then we get to the objectives. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we get to action. So we have the aspirational, high level, here's where we want to go. And then the more tactical, how do we get there? Who's going to do it? When is it going to be done? So that's the, so there's both aspects in the strategic plan. So we went through a vision exercise. So, we talked a little bit about guidelines on how to develop mission and vision statements, that they needed to be clear, concise, compelling, no complex language, mostly in the present tense, some specificity, but not too specific. They needed to be passionate, bold, not a boring catch-all, but just something that, oh, okay, that sort of thing. Needs to also kind of talk about the organization's unique offer, and then it needs to be memorable and distinct. So these are just characteristics on how to develop a vision mission statement. So we then offered about, I think, 4 different vision and mission statements from the larger companies, just to give you a feel for, here's how Tesla does it, here's how Starbucks does it, here's how Google does it. And we had some discussion on, that's really catchy, that tells everything, this is too long. Just had a conversation about that. Before we got into CA's vision statement, and then we started brainstorming a little bit on what we want to put in our mission. Again, we went back to the what. What is CA? Who are we? Why do we exist? and what are we passionate about? Those were some of the questions the SLT tried to answer. And then we came into the vision area on, where are we now? Where do we want to be 5-10 years down the line, and how do we want to get there? So we have just started that process, and we're not there yet, so I can't share anything with you, but hopefully at the next meeting, I might give you a feel for what the new mission and vision is. Also, keep in mind, we looked at the current mission and vision very closely. We're not starting from scratch. We're building on what there is, but getting more clarity. So some of these words, some of these phrases are going to be encompassed in the new mission and vision, maybe slightly differently, but it's not going to be completely different than what it is. So then the next step after the mission vision is to get into the focus areas. So going back to the original plan, they had identified a few strategic focus areas. We worked closely with the SLT to sort of rework some of those, and we added a couple new focus areas. We kept identity. We added diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as a new focus area. We changed the wording on environmental stewardship and ecological health to capture all things environment, climate related. We added a new category in community outreach and engagement. And then budget and finance, we rephrased, and then we added a new area, which is risk management and just general preparedness. So these are the 5 strategic focus areas. So under this, each of them will have objectives, which will be a slightly more detailed. And then under those objectives, each objective will have one or more actions to make it more tactical.
Alan, then Karen. Alan?
Thank you. I appreciate adding the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but help me refresh my memory on the process. You said after the mission vision, does that mean that's already been decided? And my statement behind that is, it seems to me that as the board, if we're not part of setting the mission and vision, how would this plan have something to aim at?
So the mission and vision, they're very broad. They're all encompassing. So
well, I sorry to interrupt you, but to me, a mission can't be all encompassing. That's the purpose of a mission, is to define what business we're in and what business we're not in. If it's all encompassing, it's sort of meaningless, isn't it?
when I say all encompassing, I mean it's an umbrella statement. I don't mean it's everything for everybody. That's not what I'm saying. It's a broad umbrella statement. This is the mission. For example, engage our diverse community, cultivate a unique sense of place, and enhance quality of life. That is it's very broad. There's a lot of areas that, subtopics that can go under that depending on how you interpret it. So that's why I say the mission and vision are broad. We haven't finalized the mission and vision yet. We are in the process of doing that, and we probably in the next week or two we will come up with some idea that we will share, that I hope to share at the next meeting.
Well, so is the idea that, again, I'm really more asking about process at this point. Will the board be weighing in on the mission and vision before the rest of the strategic plan is created, or will it all be presented to us sort of in a package or something?
The board will be weighing in on the mission and vision at the February 1st, what are we calling it, the work session.
Yeah, strategic planning work session.
So that's coming up. Thank you.
Yes, and that's going to be a 2-hour work. Today's is just an update on where we are. But that will be a work session where we will be looking at the mission and vision. We will be looking at the strategic focus areas, and then we'll also be looking at the objectives. So the board will have an opportunity to review and comment and wordsmith.
Karen?
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about strategic focus areas. So how did you guys come up with these? Is this based on the survey data? And I have a question about that, because Diedrich made some excellent points about the lack of diversity in the responses that we got. And so how did we come up with these strategic focus areas? What are the What are the underlying problems that we're solving for there?
So the strategic areas are based on what is in the existing strategic plan.
That's the existing strategic focus areas.
And also with discussions with the SLT. So we came up with a number, and we sort of reorganized them. We added a few new ones that the group felt were important since the last strategic plan.
So the survey didn't influence this at all?
Not really.
So what was the point of the survey?
Survey was more of for the SWOT on identifying the strengths and weaknesses and,
But you just said that the survey didn't influence this decision about
Yes.
these strategic focus areas.
The strategic plan and the strategic planning process is guided by the leaders of the agency, not necessarily the public. So under these categories, we will have objectives, and they will have actions that will relate directly to the survey. But the overall, these 5 areas are again very broad, and these are from the existing plan and from other issues that the SLT felt are necessary to put into the strategic plan. For a strategic planning process, you don't take the community preference surveys to guide the strategic focus areas. They come in at the action level, not at the strategic focus area level. This is much higher.
So do you have, so when we look at each of these, is there a problem, an underlying problem that we're solving for, something that, when you talk about identity, what is the problem that we're solving for in the future?
Yes, there is an underlying problem for each one, yes. And we've had extensive discussions on that to come up with these categories.
Dietrich?
What is meant by identity? Is it like the identity of Columbia, or what is identity?
The identity of Columbia Association, who we are, what are we known by, and, I guess, what is within, when people say CA, do they know that some responsibilities are CA's responsibilities, some are really Howard County's responsibilities? Like, where does that start and where does that end? So just that whole of who are we as an association? That was one, I think, we had extensive discussion. Identity was, that's an area that's going to have a lot of objectives under it in terms of, like, we really want to know who we are as a community.
So, I have one question. So you said you added some strategic focus areas. Which strategic focus areas were removed, if any?
I can come back to you with what we have. I don't have the existing plan with me, but to my knowledge, if memory serves me right, we added 2. The second and the fourth one are completely new. Some were rolled into others. For example, there was something stewardship, resource stewardship, I think, and we moved that to budget and finance. So we've sort of reorganized just for better understanding, if you will, because there were some terms that were not clear, even to us, like what really falls under this category. I can get back to you on which categories were removed, but I don't think we removed any categories. I can't remember. Okay. All right. So in terms of next steps, we are going to be holding a couple meetings next week with the village board members. There's also going to be a community partners meeting. There's going to be, and after that, we will start developing finalizing our objectives and developing actions along, working with the SLT. And then finally, we get into draft plan development. Alongside, we have a number of touch points with the CA board. Today is one. We'll be meeting with you in a couple of weeks. That's going to be another update on the 25th. Then we will have that 2-hour work session on the 1st of February. And then we will have updates on the 14th of March, the 11th of April, The 11th of April, we will present the final draft, and then on the 25th, we will present the summary plan. So that is sort of the map for what's going to happen between today and the 25th of April.
Sky?
When you meet with the village managers and the village board members, you won't be meeting with each individual village, but just some of them. And how were those villages selected?
The invitation went out to all villages. And we gave them options to attend one of two meetings, I believe.
Do you have a follow-up, or?
No, I'm just not aware of that. I don't think my village board got that message.
Which village?
Hickory Ridge.
Bill?
I'll contact them tomorrow again.
Okay.
I was just thinking, given some of the mismatch we had in our survey with the demographics that exist in Columbia and the demographics of the survey respondents, when we're arranging discussions with community partners, this may be an opportunity to try and focus on some of the groups in Columbia that were missed in the survey section, and maybe we could try and work together collaboratively to find community partners that would better represent a diverse community so that the input is more well-rounded. So I'd like to just make that suggestion, see if we could do that going forward.
Yeah, we worked very closely with community engagement to come up with the list of community partners that would be very representative of, our priorities within the community.
Okay. Alan? Alan?
Yeah, I just want, I like your idea, Bill, and it may be a need for overcorrecting, not just be representative, because we were underrepresented or overrepresented in various ways in the survey. I just want to echo Sky's comment that I don't recall my village board ever talking about this meeting, so I'm not sure they got the word. And as we're all members of our village boards, I don't think we ever got.
Yeah, when I put together the list, I left off the CA board members and just left on the managers and village board members.
Figured that might be so, but again, I don't recall our board ever talking about
Ellen,
it.
which village is that? Do you belong to?
Harper's Choice.
Okay.
Andy?
Well, I'll chime in and say that Owen Brown did get the message, and our board is already talking about it, and they're trying to decide which of the meetings. But yeah, our village manager sent it out, and I'm fully aware of it.
Reg?
Okay, I'll chime in too and say that the village of Long Reach has heard about it, and we're also in discussions.
Okay, we don't need to take a further poll. We'll just what villages have
Wanted to
heard?
Did get it.
Yeah, I think we've got a representative sample for the poll.
All right, this is a little hard to read, but I'll give you a quick summary. So this is just summarizing everything we've talked about. We worked extensively on the gap analysis. We're working on the mission and vision. We've identified strategic focus areas, and now we're working on the objectives. And then we're going to get into the actions and the implementation strategy, and then finally develop the document and have a presentation with the board. I do want to go back to the one question, I think, is it Bill who's sitting up there? Yeah. Okay, that Bill had talked about the parts that are underrepresented. This was a community preference survey. With the time that we had and the budget we had, all we could do was to send it out, and marketing did their best to push it. But typically, if we had the resources, we would be able to do targeted campaigns, such as going into the Latino community, going out with flyers, or on a Saturday and putting out, we've done like tabletop invites where people just come and fill out hard copies of the survey, where we target folks, or going to schools and saying, okay, let's target the high schoolers. I mean, hey guys, you use these facilities, come fill out the survey. So that would be our approach, and we've done that in the past. We just had to work with what we had. And we were monitoring it, but the needle wasn't shifting that much, even with all that push. But I just wanted to sort of explain our process.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Chris?
So, the community partners, kind of, who are some of the representatives that, or groups that you'll be meeting with? Do you have any of those currently identified?
We do have.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Sorry. Just asking if the community partners have been identified, if those could be shared.
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with the list of organizations we're including.
Cool, thank you.
That meeting, just for your reference, is next Thursday morning.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Also, who would be included under other stakeholders? Bullet 3, other stakeholder meetings.
It would be the community partners and the village board. So the bullet 3 is really developing the actions. So we will be talking to the village board.
So by stakeholders, we're talking about bullets 1 and 2, not something
Right.
separate. Okay, thanks. Sky?
Yeah, it sounds like you did not do a pilot study of the survey, which is fine. And one question I have has kind of been answered and will be done in the future. My question was, what would you have done differently if you were to do the same thing in the future? And you answered that by your process was a function of the resources, the time, and the money, and so that's fine. I can't remember my other question.
Yeah, and we've done that in the past, so I'll give you an example. We've done surveys and outreach events just for underrepresented populations. So we identify whether it's age-based or ability-based or race-based, and we go into those communities and specifically target them. And again, it's just, if we had, community outreach, that is a vast task. It's at some point you have to draw the line on how much you can do to fit in the overall scheme. But yes, that would be the approach. But on the other hand, there are segments of the population that just don't fill out surveys. Kids are just, they don't want to be bothered by it. So it's hard to get them to do that. So just understanding that as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. And if the next times you come, if you anticipate certain questions like about the survey, maybe you could bring a copy of the survey?
Yes. And we'll have a more detailed explanation of the survey that answers a lot of these questions when I come in on the 25th.
Any final questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the board work sessions and meetings, and the talk was potentially moving to a new business, old business format. I'm not sure if, Dennis, you have any introductory comments on this?
I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
We'll turn it over to Bill.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I brought this up at the Board Operations Committee meeting we had back in, I guess it was late November, when we put this on the agenda. And we had been discussing this earlier in the fall, of potentially moving from the work session versus voting meeting format to new business and old business. This is kind of based in according to the Attorney General and the Homeowners Association Act, anytime we all get together and discuss the business of the corporation, it's a meeting. Whether that meeting is characterized as a work session or a voting meeting, they're all meetings. I think that there's a little bit of confusion as far as what a work session is versus a meeting. Traditionally, a work session is a meeting in which no votes are actually taken, right? But we vote on the agenda, we vote on other things, we vote to adjourn. In addition, the work session and voting meetings generally work okay, but there's some inefficiencies here. For instance, if we were to change this policy, and we have a policy that says that we need to have this, a policy change heard at 3 meetings, we do it this meeting, we talk about it at our next meeting at the end of January, The third meeting where we could potentially vote on it would be the first meeting in February, which would be a work session, which paradoxically is a meeting that we can't take votes. So we would actually have to push it to the fourth meeting because we don't take votes every other meeting. So you can see there's some inefficiency / confusion associated with this. I think that it would give us the opportunity to continually provide an opportunity to have fresh ideas under new business, keep things moving along, and then as it tracks into old business, we could have our votes during that time. So this is something that we've been working on for a while, and I figured it was time to at least introduce it as a discussion here. And that's what typically the first reading of the 3-meeting rule is, to introduce it as a topic. I'd like everybody to take that in, think about the pluses and minuses of new business, old business versus work session and voting meeting. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to discuss it with you at this time.
So this wouldn't change the 3-meeting rule?
As far as I know, no. This would just be how the meeting is conducted. The 3-meeting policy would not be particularly touched up.
So essentially, something would show up under new business, then old business discussion only, then old business voting.
We could do it that way, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sky.
I think most people are familiar with the new business, old business model. And it even after an explanation of the working session versus the voting meeting, it really takes a good couple of months to get a good feel for it. So I think it would help communication with the residents if we went to new business, old business.
Good point.
Any other discussion? So I will, Chris.
Is there any stipulation, is there any stipulation regarding how, is there anything that dictates that we have to use the current format? What changes do we have to, is there documentation saying that we have to use this work session board meeting format and that we have to change to do that? Or is it just a decision that can be made?
Well, my understanding, because based on our board ops committee meeting, there's a policy that says that our structure is work session, voting meeting, and we would have to change that policy to go to a new business, old business format.
Okay, so it's just voting and making the decision to do it that way.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay,
Alan?
Thank you.
I was going to answer that, but that was the answer I was going to give.
Karen.
So there's an existing policy, Bill. Are you going to draft a new policy to present to the board?
I could work on that, sure.
Okay.
If that's okay with everybody, I'll take the lead on that.
Yeah, you definitely take the lead on it. Definitely touch base with general counsel on it, and that'd be appreciated. Thanks.
Yep.
Does anybody have any concerns about moving to a new business, old business?
Could we set that to go into effect start of FY25?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, I think the way that this is going to play out, yeah.
Timing-wise, it's going to work that way anyway.
By the time we get through 3 meetings, it'll practically be FY25.
Right, and also I think that there would be a fiscal impact that we'd have to go through on this as far as staff support for this. I don't think that it's going to be a huge change, but it'll be a non-zero change. So we need to at least do the due diligence on that.
Any further discussion? Any concerns? Okay. So that brings us to agenda item C, overview of the capital improvement plan.
Susan?
So you have this in your backup. I can see if I can get it pulled up, if that would be helpful. But Jeremy is going to just run through the tools that the team has used, and then we would just open it up for questions.
Hi. Good evening. As we've entered the budget process over the summer and into the fall, there was inquiry from the board on some additional detail on how staff institutes our long-range capital improvement planning in terms of how we're building these budgets every year from a capital funding perspective. So the memo you guys have before you basically lists some of the key tools that go into our capital improvement plan. So this is sort of one of the key things I want to reiterate is this is a living document, right? It's continuously evolving as, priorities of the board, as programming priorities come up for staff, but it sort of serves as a guide for us for long-term sort of strategic planning for the organization, helping us anticipate, some big costs that might be out there in the future, so we can effectively, in a strategic way, for example, aggregate funding for a large pending capital improvement. For example, the slab at the ice rink at some point in the near future is going to need to be replaced, and that's going to be a significant expense. So in our long-range capital planning, we're chunking out pieces of that. I think it's like $300,000 a year for 3 years out into the future, so it's not as big a hit on one given year, and we aggregate the funds, we have them ready when that particular investment is needed in that major piece of facility infrastructure for the organization. So I'll just walk through some of the key tools, pieces of information and strategies that we use across the departments for the process. So for the facilities component in terms of our built infrastructure, our vertical infrastructure, so there's facility condition assessments. So we actually undertook really detailed engineering and architectural studies. I think it was 13 of our largest facilities about 6 years ago. And that's really informed numerous projects throughout the organization in the interim time since those studies were completed. They've informed the large-scale renovations at the sport and fitness facilities. They've informed major improvements at some of the community centers as well. ADA assessments. So this is a little bit old, it's a little bit dated from 2012, but a lot of the priorities that were developed from the ADA assessments of our facilities infrastructure continue to be funded and improved, and those improvements are made. We have an HVAC mechanical index, so this is actually a spreadsheet model that I developed when I first started that captures about 300 of our major mechanical assets and tracks their age, condition, service level priority, and it helps us inform year to year where our dollars were spent in a strategic way as an organization. Annual building inspections. So this is basically just rolling inspections that happen throughout our community and throughout all of our village center facilities as well. Where basically our facilities team works with the village managers. Basically, it's every fall we'll work through every single building we have in the community and do an evaluation and look for items that may be capital. Most of them typically are operating that we discover, but it does inform the capital planning process as well. The neighborhood center assessments that were conducted about 5 years ago, where we took a really hard look at the condition of our neighborhood centers in particular, in terms of their physical structure, their water, sewer, other types of amenities, in terms of basically the condition of our neighborhood centers throughout the community. We actually have a roof database that our staff maintains and keeps as a living document that informs, okay, in 2 years, what are the 3 roofs that we're going to need to replace, and is that particular roof large enough to warrant its own capital request, for example? Is it a really large facility like the ice rink, or is it a small facility like Dickinson where we can fund that out of Cat 3? Moving on. Amenity improvement priorities. So this is just sort of a catch-all in terms of how the board, how staff is developing our programming for some type of new feature, a new amenity, an improvement at a pool, for example, the slide retrofit. Moving into open space. So in terms of the standards that we follow, so we're in line with basically industry standards for maintaining all of our bridges, all of our playgrounds, our vehicle and equipment, as well as our pathways. In terms of the replacement cycles, we're pretty much on track with what's stipulated across the industry for those particular open space physical assets for our replacement cycles. And then moving into the watershed capital projects. So that's informed by our watershed management plan. There are numerous plans out there that have been developed by Howard County, Kimco, for example, that identify issues in the watershed for improvements. We have ongoing lake management studies where the lakes are actually surveyed to dictate sedimentation rates to predict when they're going to need to be dredged. So based on a given infill rate, Lake Kit needs to be dredged next year. And so there's $1.5 million in the budget to accommodate that. And then several years later, Wild Lake will be next in line, and then Lake Elkhorn. So this is just a quick overview of the tools and strategies and practices we use as staff to develop the capital improvements plan. The following pages in this memo sort of dictate what the 10-year plan looks like. There's notes in there that sort of highlight what are some of the year big expenditures. The Columbia Gym locker room renovation is in there. Fairway Hills driving range improvements, that's another big projected capital expenditure that's in there. And so that's a quick summary of the tools and practices and processes that we have to inform our long-range capital planning. And I'll sort of open it up to any questions
Karen.
the board might have.
For open space, do we have a complete inventory of all the open space that we,
In terms of the assets or the ground?
both?
Yes. Yes and yes. Yes, and we're continuing to evolve the level of accuracy with how we track those particular assets, leveraging GIS as a tool. We're really excited about how we can integrate managing our physical assets, where a team member can be on the field, see something, immediately load it into our GIS map, and it immediately generates a work order, for example. There's some really neat things happening around GIS and how it's going to support our management of our assets for the community.
Yeah, I have a follow-up, Eric, if you're okay with that. So my next question is, we lease a lot of space. Are we assessing that also to see if the leaseholders are maintaining the space the way we want it maintained? So for instance, in front of the Collective, Symphony of Lights, that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, we are openly monitoring all of our assets for their conditions, and there's no space that we don't own that we're not overseeing how it's cared for in some way, whether it's making sure it's embedded in the lease agreement or some other structure.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Sky.
Yeah, I noticed, I can't remember what year, I'll pick one, that there were plans, or it was on the wish list to purchase this building, and I had not heard of that, and I was just wondering how set in stone that idea is.
So the lease was, and one of the reasons that CA and the board voted to enter into the lease for this space is that it gave the organization the opportunity for an ownership interest. So all this time, CA's been in rented space, and this lease gives us the opportunity to do that. So it is not set in stone at all. It's in the lease that it's called the fixed purchase option is in FY26. And so I thought if I didn't put it in, you would think I had missed it. If we did put it in, it looks like it's, a done deal, but it's certainly not. It would be something. And so our staff's plan, and I think our responsibility is through next year to get the information together to help you make a decision about that before that purchase option expires.
Alan?
Yeah, I should probably know this by now, which Susan should be your cue that it's a question for you. When, and it's not on you, it's on me for not knowing. When we say something like we're going to appropriate $300,000 a year for 3 years, where does that $300,000 and then $600,000 sit before we're ready to spend it during the third year?
So it would be part of the capital budget each year that the board would have to approve, and it would just be a budget reserve. So it would not be, and again, it wouldn't be a commitment to spend until we were ready to move forward with that, but it would just be a reserve.
But if we decided, for whatever reason, not to spend it after the third year, that doesn't increase our assets in any way because we've earmarked this $300,000 for 2 years running.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Someday I'll understand all this. Thank you.
No, you're getting there.
Bill?
Okay, Jeremy, just thank you for all of this information as to what you're using, the different lenses for how we get the capital spending. One thing I didn't see on this list, and it's just what I do in my world, there's not a placeholder here for codes, standards, and regulatory enforcement as far as understanding when those are coming due, when changes are coming about for, forgive me for the soup, but NFPA, ADA, all the big ones there, the electrical code, and those are all going to eventually generate some sort of capital response. And are we at all tracking any of those kind of things?
So there's a couple pieces to that. So on the facility side, typically any new code doesn't apply until you do some new work. So for the most part, all of our built infrastructure is retrofitted in or retroactively sort of. It doesn't apply until you make a major improvement. The other piece of it is that unfortunately for the most part is not grandfathered in is where COMAR impacts our pool operations. And so there is actually a $200,000 request in the budget now to respond to the changes in some of the COMAR pieces, specifically around discharge of chlorinated water into sanitary sewers.
Right.
So we're actively tracking that, and the aquatics team is really fantastic about being really proactive, and there's actually some pending changes yet to come on COMAR that may have some significant impacts on our ability to operate the pools and capitalize the mandated changes that are potentially coming.
I would add to that, while it's not a separate category on here, it is part of the plan of the underlying work that's done in each of these
In each of the individual?
Correct.
Yeah, it's embedded, and there actually is, for example, on watershed, there is a pot of money that's specific for addressing any regulatory compliance issues associated with our stormwater management facilities, because the county, for example, does regular inspections, I think, every 3 years of our stormwater management facilities, and we have funding that's allocated to respond to those requests.
Got it. Thank you.
Time's up, but we're a couple minutes ahead of schedule.
Okay, thanks. I actually do have a couple questions. So you referred to I think it was an architectural survey conducted in 2012?
The 2012 study was the ADA assessment, yeah.
And you referred to another architectural engineering study.
Yeah, so there have been multiple, it's a rolling basis, whereas stewards of our facilities, we hire outside consultants to do a top-to-bottom review of them every certain interval of time. So in 2012, there was an ADA assessment, and around 2017, we prioritized, I think it was the 13 of our largest facilities for what were called facility condition assessments, where basically an architecture and engineering firm was contracted to do a top-to-bottom review of those facilities, looking at every single component, and then coming up with high, medium, and low recommendations for improvements of those facilities.
So when would we be due to conduct that study again?
Well,
because that's 7 years now.
So this board and this organization has been really proactive in investing in our facilities. And so at this moment, our facilities are in really great shape. I don't know if you guys realize that. Maybe you do, because you maybe it happened really slowly and you don't. But over the last decade, a tremendous amount of resources have been invested in the infrastructure that supports this community, and it's in really great shape. I think we're probably looking at, from a cycle perspective, maybe in another 5 or 7 years, we would sort of start picking out some of those facilities that we did maybe 7 years ago. Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Dennis?
So I think the proposed budget includes some money to restart that.
We're up to 2.
Yeah.
For 2.
Depending on how expensive they are.
For 2.
For 2 bigger buildings. If I can make one comment too, the one really interesting thing that you don't think about if you're a homeowner, if you have commercial buildings, you can't wait until something breaks sometimes to fix it. So the swim center HVAC system is like a 40-week lead time. And it's also $500,000. And so, we don't try to get the last minute out of everything that we own. So we have to replace some things 6 months or so before they go bad. But that's why this is so important, because it schedules those kinds of things. And it's not just the swim center HVAC, it's the ice rink dehumidification system. There's a number of really specialized systems that are in our inventory, and this helps us manage those.
And I assume also the architectural survey also helps manage that too, because it'll bring up things that pop up that we might not be able to see.
Yeah, although we're really pretty good at managing our buildings. Yeah, but
it's all intertwined. The engineering, the technical aspect, and the architectural aspect are intermingled.
We have subject matter experts on HVAC. Some things like roofing we're not quite as tuned into, but for the most part.
The The other question I have is, so I'm adding up all the numbers and across the top line. It looks like it's roughly $150 million range to do everything across 10 years. So the question I have is, how's the best way to, what's our strategy to fund all of this going forward for 10 years? Because that's a pretty big number.
Well, if you had to do it all at once, it would be overwhelming, you're right.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it a year at a time. And it lays out pretty well on an annual basis. Now, these are today's dollars, so there will be increases. But each year, we plan out, we're going to take this and factor it into cash flow planning for 10 years. We already go out a few years, but the plan is to continue to use cash generated from operations to the greatest extent possible to minimize our reliance on debt, but we'll be prudent stewards of that, and we've done that for 50 years. So.
Any further questions on this topic? Going what, Karen?
Yep. I saw the money that we're spending on the pools. It doesn't look like we're going to spend any money on any pools except for the swim center and just doing the MDE required changes for the next 10 years.
No, because in the Cat 3 allocation is about $600,000 every year for outdoor pools. Every dime of that every year.
Yeah, there's significant Category 3 money that's spent every year on pools.
So every year, our annual spend is around $600,000 for the pools?
At these levels of capital budgeting, yes.
And then sometimes the mechanical components are separate on top of that. For example, the HVAC unit, the dehumid unit at the swim center was over $200,000 worth of investment in that particular infrastructure.
But at the same time, that's about $30,000 per pool, so it sounds like we're not planning any major renovations that are...
That's correct.
If I may, it's, the pools are a pump house and generally a set of bathrooms. There's not a lot of physical infrastructure there, the fence. If you got 30K to play with, that's a significant amount. I mean, a filter system is going to set you back, but we're talking about toilets and fluorescent lights, really. So
Do we also have fountains in some of these pools?
I don't know, $30,000 these days goes pretty quickly.
Yeah. Believe me, I'm in facilities. I know, I know exactly where it is. But when you look at what we have as far as what's in most of the pool enclosures, the biggest concern would be pool shells, and they get inspected yearly anyway, right? So that would be the only real detractor.
Reg?
So, question about the ice rink. I see that we're looking at an incremental funding of the slab. How much does the slab cost? I mean, that's a pretty hefty price, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll exceed $1 million, no doubt.
It'll exceed $1 million? Mm-hmm. And you said we're going to do this incrementally over how many years?
At the moment, we actually have $250,000 already set aside from the prior year.
Okay. Yeah. Will it hold up until then, or?
Dan's forgot.
Is that what you did, Dan? Is that what you did?
Hey, it worked with the Owen tennis bubble.
I got to tell you, I was thinking about not mentioning it because I didn't want to jinx this. But I broke that rule. It's okay.
No, it's actually holding up very well, surprisingly, but it does need to be on our radar, and we need to watch it.
And to clarify, that's for the existing slab, not for a second sheet of ice.
Yeah, there's no room for a second sheet.
Yeah, that's correct. Just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yes, I think that brings up a really important point. I mean, Dennis kind of alluded to it, and Jeremy, we've got a bunch of unique things, like the slab, we know it's got to be replaced, and we have to phase it in. And so if a board decides to start playing and moving money around, you got to realize the impact it might have. Mm-hmm. If you suddenly decide, well, we're not going to use that $500,000 in 27, well, then suddenly you're not going to be able to replace the slab, and so those are the things that the boards have to consider when you look at the overall budget, and that some of these have to be pre-planned 2 or 3 or 4 years in advance, and so the money has to be there when we have to actually replace it.
So I got a question on that. I mean, can the board allocate the money to, we're replacing the slab over 3 years, the money would get spent over 3 years. Obviously, you don't want to just allocate the first batch of money without allocating the second and third batches of money, because then you wind up with a quarter of a slab. But the question I have is, can the board just allocate the full thing over 3 fiscal years and pre-allocate it?
Well, not how we do our budget right now, because we do a year budget.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I mean, is there some mechanism to ensure that the whole thing gets budgeted for at once? So
I remember when we did the Stonehouse Art Center, and that is phased over 3 years, there was a lot of discussion that if the board approved the first year, then that was basically a commitment that the second and third years were going to be in the budget. Now, you know, a board can come in and make any decision they want, but, you know, up front, everybody on the board understood that going ahead with the renovations at Stonehouse pretty much meant you were committing the organization to do the next phase 2 and phase 3. And I think that's the important thing, is to bring it up when the very first phase comes up of things. I think we did something similar in Wild Lake, that we phased in the replacements of the sound system and the lighting or something. I mean, and once again, it was kind of one of those, and I think we did the same thing with the elevator at Town Center, that was kind of, although that one I'm not sure about.
The elevator, I think, is state grant funding.
Yeah, that's state grant funding.
In Slayton House, it was the raked seating, the stage, and also the lighting, just because of the setup that we have at Slayton House there.
Susan?
So the Slayton House, and because of the dollar amounts, and also I think the impact on their operations, like lighting was done 1 year and the sound system was done in, another year. But, to answer Eric's question, of course, the board could say in the FY '26 capital budget, put $1 million for the ice rink slab. And then we would have to plan around that for other needs. But of course, that could happen.
Yeah, because we could, I mean, I think if I read the budgets correctly, we've done this in the past, where you plan, say, $1 million all at once, and then it gets spent over multiple
And it
fiscal
wouldn't
years.
be spent, I think that's the thing that might be a little bit confusing. So that slab would not be replaced like a third a year?
No, obviously not. I was not suggesting that.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
But I mean, I figure it probably takes several years or might take several years to do the renovation.
It's probably permitting.
It's a year. The ice rink will close for a year when we have to do it.
Okay.
No, we're good.
Okay. Any other, Karen?
Yeah, I have one more question about the pools. I know that the Talbot Springs pool is not ADA compliant. How many other pools are not ADA compliant?
I don't know.
We'd have to.
I don't know. We keep a list on the website, I believe, but I don't recall what it is. We can get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any final questions?
I would just note, if I could, that the board should be really proud of the condition of our facilities overall. Like, we meet standards that are very tough for almost any organization to meet from a facilities, infrastructure, and maintenance standpoint. In terms of the replacement cycles, like, for the most part, out and for other organizations, those are aspirational, right? But we do them, we hit them. This board makes it happen, so you guys should all be really proud of that fact.
So I'll do one better and say that we wouldn't be in this position if the treasurer and other members of the staff didn't come in and have a plan to how we were going to, legitimately finance all this, and then plan what we have, looking at replacing items. I mean, that takes a great deal of planning, a great deal of sitting down and saying, hey, this is what our strategy is, this is what we're going to do to look forward, and this is how we're going to do it. Then come in here and sit down before us and say, yes, we've got this slab of ice. Yes, it's going to be over $1 million, but, we've got this planned out in increments for this, and it's a phased operation. That, I think, is very impressive, personally.
Thank you.
And as someone who deals with budgets all the time in my job, I've got multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment for the military, and I have to look back and say, wow, I kind of like to had you come over to my office and help me out with a few things. But thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, that brings us ironically to questions only. So does anybody have any questions under the questions only? Under questions only, we have state and county legislation. Any questions on Ellen?
Yeah, John, in the past, when we've gotten the kind of listing of the different bills, there's been an indication of what are CA's concerns? Are we going to just monitor this? Are we going to be suggesting that we seek an exemption for CA? Are we going to seek some kind of amendment to this? I didn't see any of that in this listing. Are you planning on doing that, or did I miss something?
Well, I don't know if this is on. I guess this is on.
Yep.
Okay. As appropriate, we just followed the format that, I wasn't here last year, but my understanding is we followed the format previously. I think if there was something we thought that you would have a concern on, or that we wanted to take a position, that's obviously up to the board. With respect to the General Assembly, the session just started yesterday, right? Today's Thursday, Wednesday. So, I expect there are going to be certain things that that we will draw to your attention. There are other things that we will put out for information purposes, because frankly, we don't see a need to take a position if they don't advance. Just one example, the bill that Delegate Hill came in and discussed, I don't know where that's going to go. I can tell you just as an information update, the delegation from Howard County is scheduled to meet next Wednesday morning, and I think they're going to vote on whether to support that bill or not. If they don't, it doesn't go ahead. There's really no need to take a position. So, I think as necessary we would recommend, but right now we don't feel a need to do that.
Okay, thank you. The one thing that I would say, and I've said this to others before you, is I'm concerned that over the years, we, meaning the board, have gotten behind the 8 ball when something shows up and we're not going to be meeting again because of our meeting schedule to do anything. So we depend on you to be really proactive about these kinds of things so that we have time enough to deal with something, not just find out, oh, this is important, but we don't have any way to deal with it.
Well, I appreciate the concern, and it's a point well taken. I can tell you that we're supposed to have our first meeting with our lobbying person tomorrow, and we're going to probably meet on a weekly basis so that if there's anything urgent, we'll get a heads up and immediately inform the board. So your point is well taken, and if there's something that requires urgency, we'll get to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing no questions, that brings us up to Chair's remarks. First, I'd like to thank Andy for stepping in and running the meeting last December when I couldn't make it. Second of all, I'd also like to thank everybody for working on the strategic plan as that plan goes forward. And with that, I'm going to announce that we're going to have a special meeting of the Board of Directors to work on the strategic plan on February 1st at 7 p.m. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn? Good motion by Karen, seconded by...
I'll second.
By Andy. Any objections to adjourning? Seeing no objections, the meeting is adjourned at 8:55. Thank you.